What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to basketball. And more importantly, welcome back to our season preview series, the series where we're breaking down all 30 NBA teams before the start of the regular season. We go extremely in-depth in these videos. We're going to talk about rotations, depth chart, what's their salary cap situation look like, what kind of draft assets do they have, what did their offseason look like, trade ideas, everything that you could possibly need to be ready for the start of the regular season. In this video, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm currently living in Minneapolis. I'm not a Timberwolves fan, but man, the excitement is here right now. So hey, make sure you guys like, subscribe, and comment. I've responded to every single comment in my YouTube channel up to this point, and I intend to keep on doing so. All right, let's get into it. Alrighty, y'all, as you can see, and as always, we have a lot to talk about here, and that's why we have the season preview spreadsheet here. For those of you that don't know, maybe you're new to the channel or something, I like to build these spreadsheets to kind of help articulate things in my videos. I don't know, I like using Excel and Google Sheets and things like that. If you want access to the spreadsheet, it's a pretty easy process. All you have to do is leave me a comment saying, hey, I'd like access to the spreadsheet, or something along those lines. I'll then drop you a link to join my Discord. From there, hop on the Discord, shoot me a DM there. It's easy to find me. Just be like, hey, I was on YouTube hoping to get access to the spreadsheet. Awesome. I'll just give it to you right then and there. I get comments on my YouTube channel, good for the algorithm. You get a fun spreadsheet to play with where you can mess with numbers and trades and things like that. Everybody wins. But anyway, we're here to talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves. Man, what a year it was last year to live in Minneapolis, man. Like, I'm just a basketball fan, right? Like, I love basketball. My favorite team's the Chicago Bulls. Unfortunately, it's a hard thing to talk about right now. Don't ask me about it. But, you know, it's cool living in Minneapolis, right? The Timberwolves are traditionally not very good. Minnesota sports struggle like maybe no other city in the United States. I can't think of a team that just goes through more just nonsense than Minnesota sports teams do. They've got to have it the worst out of anybody. I have to imagine, at least. They're never good. They don't win anything, ever. Sometimes they get really close, though, and that just hurts. And unfortunately, the Timberwolves had another season where they got kind of close. But man, they exceeded all of our expectations. We've seen the rise of Anthony Edwards. We've seen the rise out of guys like Naz Reid and stuff like that. Karl-Anthony Towns, a nice complementary player. Him and Gobert learned how to play together in a lot of ways. This was an awesome basketball team to watch last year, and watching a couple games in person last year and having some pretty solid connections on this team, to say the least. I'll leave those details for the ether to explore what that might mean. But anyway, I'm really well connected with this team. I've really enjoyed watching them. It was a blast watching Anthony Edwards in the playoffs last year and everything. Obviously, this team fell short, but there's a lot of optimism going into this season, because I'll be honest with you, like, Minnesota, they might have had the best offseason in the NBA. Like, I mean, there's other teams that have had some pretty good ones, but like, I think the Timberwolves pretty clearly won the draft. I don't think there was any ifs, ands, or buts about that. I'd be down to hear your guys' arguments with that, but I thought they just had a really solid offseason as well. Now, they didn't go out and get like a Paul George or something like that, no, but this team was in the second apron. They had no money to use, and I thought they maximized with what they had, and so I want to give them a round of applause for that, and we'll talk about that more in this video. But I think this team really saw where its weaknesses was this offseason, and they really went and addressed them. So that's awesome. We're going to talk about all this stuff. Last year, 56-26, right? Awesome. It was a great season last year. They had a lot of success. Really elite defensive group. You think about shot creators, right? Shot creators is going to be a term that we use often in this video. This team was lacking them last season. That was probably their number one weakness, right? Like, where is offense going to be generated from? Anthony Edwards? Yep. Dude is a walking bucket, right? We learned that last year. Karl-Anthony Towns? Yep. He can go get his buckets too, sometimes in odd ways, and there was certainly times where I was kind of questioning like how they were getting him his buckets, but it's whatever, right? Dude was getting buckets. After that, yeah, we had no idea where buckets were going to come from on this team, and they couldn't really find a great solution to it either. It was kind of just, hey, who's going to get hot tonight? And there wasn't a ton of guys that typically get hot, so it was kind of a problem for them last year. But again, they tried to address that this offseason, and that's awesome. Looking at the franchise status, this team is 100% contending. They were very close to being in the finals last year, and there's no reason to think that they won't be there again. These are the next three, or these are the other three levels that I possibly list teams as: the selling, rebuilding, growing. Nope. This team is in contention. Now, I do think, and I'm very curious to hear what you guys think about this, because it's a topic I'm going to dive into later. It's how long is this window open for? Now, Anthony Edwards is on the team, right? But everyone else on the team are in different spots in their career, right? But I think this team is operating in a way to where it's going to be okay no matter what, but we're going to talk about it later in the video, so just keep it in mind. But anyway, we got goals. I always think it's important to talk about goals before we go into all the other tabs that I have listed here that are much more interesting than this one, right? We want to keep these goals in the back of our mind as we're going throughout the rest of this video, right? The 3 goals I have for them this year: retain and maximize Naz. Naz Reid, obviously, he has a player option at the end of this season. Naz Reid has been a phenomenal developmental story for this franchise. I'm a huge Naz Reid fan. He's like a folk hero in Minneapolis right now. I see him on so many random billboards, and I went to a lake house this summer because that's a Minnesota thing to do. Everybody just goes to lake houses, and there's just Naz Reid posters at these random Airbnb things that you go to, like everywhere in Minnesota. It's crazy. It's crazy. People love Naz here. I don't think we've completely unlocked Naz Reid even yet. Obviously, 6th man of the year and everything, right? That's awesome. I've seen a lot of Naz Reid's offseason this year and everything. I'm feeling very excited about him and stuff. I just think there's a lot of room to grow. So how do we maximize him and keep him on this team? Because he's much more on like Anthony Edwards' like timeline and everything. So important guy. Play the young guys. We have 2 very nice rookies coming into this team this year. Obviously, they both have their flaws and everything, but I think they're 2 very playable guys at positions that are needed for Minnesota. So this is great. We've got promising young players, opportunities to play, a good team already with good support guys around them. Let's get them on the court early, right? Let's get these guys on the court and get them ready for the playoffs, because we're going to need them in the playoff run, which that's a tough thing for young guys, but that's kind of a cool situation at the same time because it promotes growth, right? It's just what it's going to be. And then my last one is make Ant a primary ball handling option. What do I mean by that? I feel like Anthony Edwards up to this point hasn't been the best creator with the basketball. What do I kind of mean by that? I want him to be a guy that can more so like initiate offense, have players running through him, have some sort of scheme and flow going around him. I feel like some of his passing skills haven't developed yet still. Some of the court vision stuff isn't quite there all the way, and so I want there to be a point where the handle's getting a little bit tighter. We're feeling a lot better about him initiating offense and stuff, especially as there's not like a guy in like Mike Conley on the team much longer. Obviously, Dillingham is on the come up and everything, but I feel like for Ant to reach that next level, he needs to develop those skills a little bit more. And actually, shout out Team USA. I think that they were kind of realizing that as well, because they put him in a ton of those opportunities this offseason during the Olympics and stuff. So I think we're on our way, and I think we're going in the right direction. It's something I want to keep in mind for this season. But anyway, let's talk about this offseason that I keep hyping up. Alrighty, here is the Timberwolves offseason in one picture. We have to zoom out a little bit more to actually see all the things that happened in this one. So for those of you unfamiliar with my videos, I always break this down into 3 categories. We got drafted players. You understand what that means because you have a full brain, I hope. Player departures, players that were on the full-time roster last year, no longer on the full-time roster. And then players brought in, just basically other guys that have been in professional basketball or somewhere else that are now on the full-time roster, right? So those are the 3 levels that we have here. Let's start off, though, with this really cool NBA draft. All right, so there's actually a lot I want to talk about with the Timberwolves in this NBA draft because they made like so many smart moves in like a single move. It was really, really impressive, and it all starts off with Rob Dillingham. Rob Dillingham, very small point guard, very small point guard. Watched him in the pre-draft process and everything. Dude is slippery. He can get away. He's quick. He gets his shots up, right? Like he converts on a pretty good amount of them. Sometimes takes bad shots and everything. He's a young scoring point guard. That's what he does. Turnovers maybe a bit of a concern, goes hot and cold from points, right? But shot creator, right? That's what this guy's going to look to do. You look at him, and I always would say, like, I can see how this guy can become a starting point guard in the NBA. Like, and I couldn't always say that about some of the other guards, like, in this class. I'm like, I can see the path for this guy. I was like, but I have concerns. Defense is going to be a major struggle for this guy. Just his frame and everything is going to make it incredibly difficult to play. It's just going to be hard for him to play defense, right? But I'm like, the scoring's cool and everything. Maybe he just develops into like a spark plug off a bench or something like that. I don't necessarily know. And that's because a lot of the lottery teams and everything we were looking at, and we were like, yeah, they're not going to have the right support around him. Nobody knew that Minnesota had this guy on their radar. So Minnesota makes a trade with San Antonio, who, shout out San Antonio, they were smart enough to realize we don't need another draft pick in this class. Like, we don't see anybody we necessarily want, so we're not going to pick someone, right? So good on them. But the Timberwolves were like, we could use a scorer and things like that, especially at the point guard position. We could use a guy like that. And what's great is they have the defense to put around this guy. I'm so cool with you having this spark plug of an offensive guy. Nobody has to be great at everything. I think Dillingham will always be somewhat of a defensive liability just because of his frame and stature and stuff. But look, if we're going to put guys like Anthony Edwards, like McDaniels, like even Cat, who's like a pretty good perimeter defender, and like Rudy Gobert, guys like Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, right? Like you name it, like cool, I don't care then. Like somebody needs to get the buckets, and that's great. That's what he can be on the team to do. They have so much other defense around him. He ended up in the perfect spot for him. He's like, his job is just going to be go get buckets this year. Cool, that's perfect. Coming off the bench, be a spark plug, phenomenal. I love this addition by them. And then here's the other great thing about it. So they traded like a 2030 or like a 2031 pick or something like that, which a lot of teams are like, oh dang, like that was like the last pick they could trade or whatever. Here's the real genius behind that. So the Timberwolves were going to lose access to that pick for a little bit because of how the new apron rules and everything work. So the Timberwolves were like, shoot, we either get to use this pick now or we don't get access to it anymore. And look, we're trying to win right now, so let's use our assets. And I love that. Like, be concise, stick to your plan, right? You're trying to win basketball games right now? Good, you found the guy you want. He fits your system in a way that you need right now. He's just a positional need. Everything worked out perfectly. I know I hyped up this draft pick a lot, but there was so much intelligence that went into making this move, and like nobody had it on their radar. Phenomenal. And then it gets better. The draft gets even better because Terrence Shannon Jr. fell to them, which we knew he was going to fall in the draft. For those of you that have been watching the channel for a little bit, I did a lot of pre-draft stuff and everything. I did some draft stuff for an NBA team this year. I do player eval, stuff like that. And so Terrence Shannon Jr. on my big board was a top 5 player. I was like, this is one of the best players in this draft. I think he's the most complete player in this draft right now. Like, this guy can do really everything. He has handle, he can shoot, he's a great defender, he can create. Like, this guy just is a good basketball player. He's got good size at like 6'6", almost 6'7", can play the wing. And what's really cool about Terrence is, like, he's a little bit older of a rookie, but like, also we should talk about the athleticism's crazy. Him in transition, absolutely nuts. Probably the best finisher coming into this class and everything. I could go on and on about this guy, but what's so great is so many young guys come into the NBA and they have like 1 or 2 moves, and that's pretty common, honestly, is players not having enough like moves, and then more importantly counter moves to build off of those, because counter moves, that's the game of chess that you're playing in the NBA, right? Like, you do a move, your defender knows how to counter that move, so how do you do a counter then, right? Like, that's the game of chess that is played within ball handling, right? And Terrence Shannon Jr. has like 9 or 10 combo or counter moves that I've already counted that I'm like, okay, yeah, this guy, he can just dissect people already. He totally understands, like, okay, if you go there, I'm going here. If you're going there, I'm going here, right? So obviously off the court issues, there was some pretty serious off the court stuff. The courts have come back and said, nope, wasn't him, wasn't involved or whatever. Cool. Unfortunately, that means he fell in the draft and everything, because teams were a little bit skeptical about, like, what do you do with that? Which you can tell me if you think that's morally right or wrong. I'm not going to tell you one way or another. I'm just saying I understand why they're doing it. But apparently he's good to go. He's innocent. And, like, man, they got a talent. Again, you got another shot creator, a guy that long term could be a starter on this team. Like, and it's just awesome, right? This guy's going to be able to play day one. He's going to get more minutes than Dillingham right away, because, like, look, this guy should have gone in the draft above Dillingham. That's how much better he is and everything, and that's no shot at Dillingham. That's just how good Terrence Shannon Jr. is. So you got him with like a late 20s pick. He's going to be an instant impact guy that's going to be able to play great defense, get buckets for you, things like that. I'm really, really excited about him as a basketball player. So great draft, Minnesota. Great draft. Like, flawless A+ draft. Let's talk about departures. Honestly, you're looking at the departures and, like, nothing crazy to write home about. Kyle Anderson played significant minutes for this team. Nice defensive player. We all know about the jump shot. It's a little rough. We all love slow-mo for his slow style and Euro stepping and everything. He wasn't a high-level contributor for this team, though. He was out there and he had some big moments in the playoffs, especially when the Mavericks were like running everybody like into the middle of the court, and like that was their whole strategy, and Kyle Anderson lives from that spot. So dude was getting like buckets in that series because of that. But did you really need Kyle Anderson on this team? No, he didn't necessarily fit or anything, just because of the lack of spacing, and you needed guys that can do that around like Gobert and stuff. So there was just certain combinations of players you couldn't go to because of that, and it just made things complicated. So Kyle Anderson out the door isn't the worst thing in the world. Monte Morris out the door was a trade they made in the middle of last season. They took on Monte Morris that was recently coming back from injury. We all like Monte Morris as a player and thought that trade made a lot of sense. They needed help at the point guard spot. He never quite seemed to find his his game, I guess, in Minnesota, unfortunately. It seemed like he was just like a step slow the whole time, so maybe not fully healthy or anything. He's on his way to Phoenix. His counting numbers weren't bad. I mean, we look at Monte Morris, and you got 42% from three. He couldn't do anything at the rim, unfortunately. And like the turnover numbers are always nice. Like, he doesn't turn the ball over. He's a very smart basketball player. It's just he couldn't contribute at a level that they could even really put him out there for the playoffs, unfortunately. So again, like, would you have liked him to work? Yes, but it didn't, so it didn't. Jordan McLaughlin. I'm a big fan of McLaughlin. I'm not saying he's like a complete player by any means, but like, I love the energy that he plays with, has a ton of hustle, and like offensively, like, he's not bad. He can at least like create some motion in the offense because he can blow by people, and he's got a good 3-point look. I mean, if we look at McLaughlin, where is he and what team is he on now? Is he in Sacramento? I believe that's right. I mean, only got up 1.6 per game because he wasn't playing that much, but shot 47% from three. So dude was making the shots that he took, and that's awesome, right? They picked up TJ Warren at one point of the season in hopes that he could be a shot creator for them. Again, he couldn't find it or get on the court. I'm guessing that the injuries have just kind of worn TJ down at one point. Great scorer in the NBA, but is what it is. And then Wendell Moore, former draft pick of theirs, it was part of a trade, just wasn't finding his way onto the court. There's not enough minutes to even really evaluate this guy whatsoever. So really, you look at the losses for this team, and it's nothing significant, right? So cool, you lost out on some players that you didn't necessarily need. But who'd you bring in to replace him, though? We start off with Joe Ingles, Jinglin' Joe. What do I always say? The best NBA teams are finding the right locker room vets, right? Think the Patrick Beverleys, the Taj Gibson, Udonis Haslem, right, at once upon a time. Joe Ingles is another guy on that list. Patty Mills is another one being used like that this year. The smart teams are doing stuff like that. The Pacers with James Johnson, right? The Timberwolves did the smart thing again. Their GM is like, got to get that veteran guy on the team, right? That's just going to be a leader on the team that everybody's going to like. They're a great teammate in Joe Ingles, and on the court, he can actually help you because, one, he can handle the ball. Joe Ingles is really good in pick and roll for whatever reason. And even last year, when we just did the Orlando Magic video not too long ago, we saw, like, statistically, a lot of the Magic's best lineups are with Joe Ingles in there. Like, statistically, he's still a high-impact player. And we all know he shoots the shit out of the basketball. Like, that boy, like, he's tough as nails. He can hit threes. He can run the pick and roll and stuff. That's awesome, right? We might see the slowest pick and roll between Joe Ingles and Karl Anthony Towns. It could be phenomenal. It'd be beautiful. Him and Rudy Gobert. Could you imagine that? It'd be hilarious. But at the end of the day, like, it's a great pickup for a lot of reasons. He can play spot minutes for you. He's going to be a great leader. That's awesome. And then PJ Dozier. Welcome back to the NBA, PJ Dozier. Fell out of the NBA early in his career due to some injuries and everything. We haven't seen much of him just overall in his career. We were hoping for like a 3-and-D athletic wing. He's got some good size on him or whatever. Apparently they think he's healthy enough to play this year, so he got a contract. He's back on the team. Great. We'll take a potential 3-and-D wing, right? Like, every team needs those guys. So if that's going to be what he can be, great. We just haven't seen much of him as of late, so I think he's probably going to have to try to prove himself, get back into like NBA ship. I know he's been playing like overseas and things like that, so I guess we'll see, but I like the signing nonetheless. It's a low risk, nice reward type of signing, so I dig it, right? I dig it. And as you guys can do the math, there's going to be an open roster spot on this team. So that means that while they won't be able to play in the buyout market because of where they are financially on the team, it means that they can do other things to bring in players as needed. So phenomenal offseason, Minnesota. Phenomenal offseason. I love it. I love it. Let's go talk about the rest of the roster. Alrighty, so as you guys know, this is my favorite tab on the entire workbook. This is basically the ideal off-season spreadsheet right here, and this shows us a bunch of different things. Obviously, we can take a look at the current roster and the current status of everything. I think that's a cool thing to be able to take a look at. We've got the salary cap info right here. I know there's a lot of red on that screen right now. This is an expensive basketball team. We've also got a depth chart to look at, and we've got a draft pick listing here. So all of these things are going to help us get a sense for, like, okay, what's this team working with asset-wise? Where are some possible holes that we could possibly fill, or what do we need to look at on this team so that we can make some evaluations, be like, what needs to be addressed during the season? And then we'll make some mock trades and stuff like that to see if we can't fix those problems. But I always like to start with draft picks, so you know what? Let's go start there because it's not going to take that long to talk about them. As always, some of the picks not listed here have protections or they're just swap rights or something. I'm just listing things that they have, like, access to, that they can actually do something with right now, right? Or some of them they might not even, well, actually, no. Now that they've traded the 2031 pick or whatever, yes, they should have access to like all this stuff. But this is what the Timberwolves have at their disposal at this point. They do have a couple of 2025 second round picks. And I know this sounds stupid, but that's actually really valuable for them to have right now. First thing, 2025 class is supposed to be pretty good, right? We all know that this is going to be a pretty good draft class. I haven't done any evaluations really on it yet. I've just seen some clips here and there. The people that I do know that like this is their job to do, they're like, oh, AVC, this one's looking good. This one's looking pretty hot right now. And like we all knew going into this draft, it didn't look very hot, and that turned out to be correct. So I'd like to think that these people know what they're talking about as well. And I'm personally excited about some of the players coming in. So when you're a contending team like this and you've got like a ton of salary that you have to pay your players and everything, these second round picks are awesome. You can get guys, especially with the new like second round exceptions that you can use to sign people. You can sign these second round picks to like 3 or 4 year like non-guaranteed contracts, so you can get rid of them whenever, but you can use these players as like, hey, we're going to try to develop these guys off the bench, but you can put them at the end of the bench. They're really cheap. It's awesome, right? So having these picks, big time, right? Big time. A second round pick going into next year as well. It's a little bit complicated how it works, but still, you have a 2028 first round pick. The Timberwolves don't have access to a lot of their picks, and that's unfortunate. And they've got some more second round picks here. Is it like an A plus draft pool? No, it's not. Like, they don't have the most assets in the world, but you do have a good and successful team right now, so that's part of it, right? You had to spend some of those assets to go get some of these players, but I actually think it's better than it looks, just because they do have at least some of these second round picks going forward that they can use and that they can use to fill out the roster and things like that. So not that bad, really, not that bad. All right, let's talk about salary cap. So just so you guys know, there's 4 levels to the NBA salary cap. If you guys haven't watched my videos before and stuff, I go into a much more detailed breakdown about how all of these work and the implications of all of them in my first video or 2 in this series, the Celtics and Grizzlies one. So go watch that one if you want an in-depth version. But here's your quick breakdown. You have a salary cap line, right? That's just when that hits 0, you're not bringing in any new players onto your team unless they have a minimum contract. Pretty much that simple. It's a basic one in all of sports. Luxury tax. When this one hits 0, which, it has, your team's going to get way more expensive to operate, right? And there's like, it's compounding. So every year you're in it, your team gets more and more and more expensive. And eventually your team just goes broke, I'm guessing. I don't know. But, then we have the first 2 aprons. These are new to the NBA, the first and second apron. The NBA has added these as an added like kind of stipulation and hurdle for championship contending teams. The NBA was sick of star players being traded all the time and just players moving willy-nilly. It's not good for their like fan or retention numbers, and those are important to all leagues. We're seeing struggles in college basketball right now because players just move all the time and fans have a hard time connecting with their teams then. So the NBA puts these rules in place that basically say, okay, if you're going to have a championship level team, meaning your team's expensive, unless you're the Oklahoma City Thunder, because they're just smarter than the rest of us, then we're going to make it damn near impossible for you to make moves on your team. Like, the only way you can make moves is if you really try to blow things up. But even then, like the Chicago Bulls are seeing right now, right? The Bulls want to blow things up. At least I hope they do. They're like, okay, we'd like to trade Zach LaVine. Teams are like, well, we might like Zach LaVine, but he costs a lot of money, and then we're going to be in the aprons. And what if we're just stuck with Zach LaVine? Then we can't move, right? Because they're just going to be stuck. So teams don't necessarily want to take on the contracts either, so it's very hard to make trades nowadays. And the Timberwolves are well past the second apron. What does that mean, right? It means they're not packaging players together in trades. If they're making a trade at all, it has to be like a 100% match of salary, or they have to take less salary. You're not getting any like better players on this team, most likely. You're not playing in the buyout market or anything like that, right? So they're really restricted at this point. This is pretty much the team that they have to work with. They do have 1 open roster spot, so they can go sign some free agent for a minimum or something like that, but it can't be a buyout player. So kind of tough in that sense, right? But that's okay. You've got a team that's trying to contend right now, and that just is what it is, unfortunately. So let's talk about the current roster and everything then, because we've got 3 very expensive players here at the top. First one being Big Cat Karl Anthony Towns. Dude gets buckets, right? Dude gets buckets. He can shoot the shit out of the basketball. He's athletic. He can get to the rim if he needs to. Sometimes on the block, he looks a little goofy, and I'm very concerned about the ways he's trying to score with some of his fadeaways and things like that I don't know, I haven't seen them necessarily work all that well, so it's whatever. But they did discover the theory that I'd had for a long time, which was like, Karl Anthony Towns, I think, actually is, because historically horrible defensive player, mostly just in the pick and roll and like playing as a center. Like, he's been pretty bad defensively. He could not figure out how to guard a pick and roll to save his life for most of his career. It was pretty rough. But what I was saying is, I'm like, I feel like if you put Cat on the perimeter where he has to like just pay attention and guard the ball the whole time, I think he's actually going to be okay. okay. And he was. So great. Like, that's the solution then. Gobert's the center. Cat goes out and guards the perimeter. Cool. We're awesome then. He was switching on to like KD and stuff and giving him trouble. Beautiful. I love that. So Karl Anthony Towns, an important part of this basketball team. Rudy Gobert. First of all, let's just keep Shaq out of these comments wherever he is, because he hates Rudy Gobert, doesn't he? We were talking about this in the Discord. You guys know, what for you guys it would have been a couple days ago at this point, but for me it was like just yesterday. So Rudy Gobert, for whatever reason, is just being hunted by Shaq right now. I don't know why he doesn't like him. I think we all know, like, Rudy Gobert has his deficiencies, right? Offensively, he is pretty damn useless, right? Like, his level of coordination is poor, his hands suck, dude just doesn't catch the basketball half the time, but like defensively the dude's a damn monster, right? Like he's phenomenal on that side of the basketball, and he knows what he's doing, right? So big time impact player, always going to be defensive player of the year candidate and stuff like that. He's one of the best defensive players of this generation, and so that is what he is, right? So we know Rudy Gobert, pretty simple, but a huge impact on this team. Awesome, right? Got 2 years left, and there is a player option after this year, so guess we'll see what happens with that, because I think that there's an interesting conversation to be had about how worth it is Rudy Gobert to this team, right? Like, we just talked about how big of an impact that he has, but dude's getting a little bit older now, and $43 million is a lot, right? But again, he's a defensive player of the year. So here's my question, right? Because I want to start this conversation out, and I want to know what you guys think down in the comments. Anthony Edwards is really good at basketball, right? One of the best players we have in this league. The Timberwolves are contenders right now. But with Gobert getting older, right? And I mean, Cat's not going to be young for forever, right? I mean, he's kind of in his prime right now, but is there a point where this team can do a soft rebuild, like a soft reset kind of, right? Because they've got a couple young players to develop, right? And at some point, Gobert is just not going to be useful anymore, right? And so with the way that the salary cap works now, you have to like get out of the aprons completely and then work your way back in. What do I mean by that? Because let's say Rudy Gobert leaves, right? We lose Rudy Gobert. We have $7 million to work with now, right? So your option becomes either re-sign Rudy Gobert or get a player for $7 million. I don't know about you guys, but I think I'd rather just have Rudy Gobert, right? So that makes things a little bit complicated, right? You're like, okay, so that kind of sucks. So does there become a point where this team says like, okay, we need to lose Gobert, we need to lose Conley, we need to like lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker? It's like, okay, now we've got $22 million to work with. Can we construct a team that's actually better, but without some of these guys, right? So that's the tough thing. And then you have to lure other good players to you and stuff. I don't know. I just think it's a conversation that needs to happen, right? Because Gobert, like, what if he opts out of his contract this year, right? And then he wants a 4-year deal. Does anybody want Rudy Gobert like 3 years from now? I don't know. I personally would be skeptical of that, right? But otherwise, you just lose Gobert. So I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting. But it's not the worst thing in the world, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now, we talked about Ant Edwards already. Like, awesome player. Could be the face of this league at some point. He's that talented. He's a dog. Like, we love Anthony Edwards, right? And dude's just phenomenal to watch. Not surprised at all that he's performing at the level that he is. I don't need to explain it anymore. Jaden McDaniels. This was an interesting one. Jaden McDaniels just got a big contract and everything, and it's kicking in right now, right? So, younger player, they developed him, monster defensive player, right? Can go out and guard anybody on the basketball court, right? We saw the season prior, like, the offensive stats start to look pretty good and promising, and that's why he got the extension. We're like, yeah, this is a great guy to have next to Ant. We've got our 3-and-D guy of the future. Took kind of a step back offensively this year. Aggressiveness wasn't that great. Performing at the rim wasn't as good as it once was. I mean, let's take a look at his stats really quick. I mean, Jaden McDaniels, only 10 points a game, only was getting about 3 rebounds. Like, he's not distributing the basketball. The 3-point shot's only about 34% right now, not getting up a huge clip. And I mean, we'll pull up like the shooting chart itself even, but like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of us were really hoping that we would continue to see the growth that we were seeing the season prior with McDaniels, right? Where we were going to see him start to really develop that 3-point shot and be maybe a potential another scorer on this team or something, right? Because he does have some good skill set, or he does have a pretty solid skill set to him, and obviously the defense is phenomenal. But as we look at this shooting chart, right, like, it's not enough in the paint. Like, he's existing kind of on the wings, right, as a corner shooter, and that's what you expect out of a guy of his position. Not hitting a big clip of them. Nothing else is happening out here, unfortunately. There's a couple other scattered shots, and like, yeah, if he can get next to him, that's great, but it's not a high percentage of shots. It's just not a lot of looks in general. So I think that there's a question there about like, okay, like how do we pick up where we left off, right? Because Jaden McDaniels is a guy that I feel like if you don't get him involved early in a basketball game, he kind of zones out kind of thing. So where do we take Jaden McDaniels? I don't know, but he is still a valuable player nonetheless. All right, on to Naz Reid. Hit the Naz, everybody. I love Naz Reid. I think he's a phenomenal basketball player. He's the current sixth man of the year. We talked about him and his skill set already, how he's able to space the floor. He can handle a little bit. It seems like he's trying to develop those even more so that he can play next to Gobert or Cat as much as possible and play like the 4 if he needs to. I think Naz is the perfect in-between of Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert. And I think that there was a lot of times in the playoffs where he was actually the most effective center on the team because of that. His ability to just be so dynamic and to fit into whatever situation they need is awesome. And I think it's an extremely rare trait to find at this position. That's why I think that there's a case to say after this season, like, maybe don't bring Gobert back and maybe you do a soft rebuild. Like, let's say Dillingham has an okay season. Maybe Conley's gone. Maybe Nickeil Alexander-Walker is gone or something like that, right? You just move Naz up into the rotation. Maybe you go find another cheaper backup center, and maybe you just go find someone at a different position that you want to pay a little bit more, and maybe the team's a little bit better off because of that. I think it's an interesting discussion to have, and that's why I'm saying like one of the goals has got to be like retain Naz Reid and maximize his talent, because we have to know if that's a possibility or not. Mike Conley, great vet to have on the team, sportsman or teammate of the year, like every year. Everybody loves Mike Conley. I've actually never met Mike Conley. I'd love to meet Mike Conley. He seems just like a great and wise dude. You guys should look up his house. He has like a full basketball like arena at his house. It's awesome. Still contributes to this team at a very high level. I mean, you're getting 11 points a game, shooting 44% from 3 on 5 a game. That's amazing. The assist numbers are looking good, keeps turnovers relatively low for how much he's handling the rock, hits clutch shots. We love Mike Conley, right? We talked about Dillingham a little bit already. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, again, another nice developmental story for them, and I know I'm maybe starting out a little bit optimistic for the last time we saw Nah on the court, because the playoffs were bad, to say the least. He did not play well in the playoffs. Dude could not find the bottom of the bucket, unfortunately. The defense was still good, so maybe I shouldn't say bad, just offensively he was struggling, but last season overall, like, Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a nice 3-and-D option for this team. I mean, if we look at him, you got 8 points a game, 39% from 3. The defensive numbers were good. Most defensive players, or most players on this team had good defensive numbers last year because a lot of them are defensive players. So presumably this is a nice, like, 3-and-D wing that you have. Hopefully the three-point shot continues. It was his first year really seeing that. I actually watched him play in high school or whatever. I recruited a guy from his high school, and I was like, oh, wow, this is an interesting player. I didn't think he'd be as good as he was, but yeah, no, we're really happy about his development. We talked about Joe Ingles, talked about Terrence Shannon, Luka Garza. How about that? I didn't think Luka Garza would still be sticking around in the NBA, but man, like, he's figured it out. Like, he's slimmed down, he's gotten quicker and everything. He's still just going to be kind of a bully down low, but for his size, like, he's a massive dude. He's a really strong dude. Like, as just a third option or a reserve big man on your team that can just really bully people, get rebounds, and finish around the rim, I love it. Like, I love having this. And so he's got like a full-time contract now and everything. It's cheap. It's great. Like, this is one of the better reserve centers you can have in basketball right now. Great. We talked about PJ Dozier a little bit already. We got Josh Minot, who we just have not seen him play much basketball, but he's a young guy they're trying to develop off the wing for this team. So I guess we'll see. And then we got Leonard Miller, who was a rookie last season, didn't play a ton, was mostly in the G League. I know Timberwolves fans like Leonard Miller a lot. I'm a little bit more skeptical of him. I know you guys see him move because he's like 6'10 or whatever, moves pretty well. He's pretty athletic, gets up and down the court, and that's a skill set in itself, right? His shooting form is really odd to me, and it's not that consistent at the moment. And so I think if we could get him to a point where he's going to be a spacing 4 or something like that, then yeah, this is an extremely valuable asset. And I feel even better about like a potential Rudy Gobert exit or something like that, because then we have a lot of dynamicness between Karl-Anthony Towns, Leonard Miller, and Naz Reid. Like, that's an amazing like big man rotation with so many different implications that you could have. So he's young. It's going to take him a bit of time. We just haven't seen a ton of it yet, but there's certainly something there. I'd like to develop it if I was on this team. So I like it. This is a nice roster, y'all. This is a nice roster. If we can take a look at the depth chart quick, you look at the point guard position, we're feeling pretty good about it, right? Maybe you could use the last roster spot to go get one more guard or something like that. Obviously, we feel good about these two, though. You're looking at the shooting guard position. Oh, my goodness, does it look great. You got Anthony Edwards. You got Terrence Shannon, who I think he's going to be, again, instant impact. Still got Nickeil Alexander-Walker on the team, who was awesome for them last year. Keep it up. Looking at the wing position, McDaniels again. What are we going to get out of him this year? Are we going to get a little more offense again? I'd love to see it. Jinglin Joe's on the team, and then you got 2 ifs. We'll call them ifs. Like, we'll see what if happens, right? That's the best way I can put it. But Joe, nice reserve option, so maybe a little bit sparse at the forward position for that reason. Got Karl-Anthony Towns playing the power forward with a young Leonard Miller behind him. And at the center, you're loaded. Absolutely stacked, right? So we feel pretty good about this team, man. This team's going to be in contention again, but let's try to mock up like a trade or two. It's going to be hard. This is a second apron team, right? So what are we possibly thinking about, right? Like, if we want to make an impact trade, what could it possibly be, right? You look down the team, who's not really necessary, and you struggle to find somebody, right? Like, maybe the only tradable contract is like a Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but I'd probably just rather have him for $4 million for the chance that he's going to play the way that he has. And so I don't want to make trades just to make trades. So now we're looking at trading like minimum contract dudes or something like that and pairing them with some second round picks and seeing if we can make something happen. So I guess we'll explore and see what we can come up with. So here's what I was trying to do. I was looking at the team and I'm like, okay, you could trade Josh Minott or something like that, right? We go and look at Josh Minott here and the salary that he makes. He has one of the cheapest contracts in the NBA. So the only way he can be traded right now, because they're in the second apron right now, is they would either have to trade him for someone of equal contract value or somebody less. Well, Tyler Smith is the only one less. I don't think they're trading him. And the only people equal are Jalen Williams and Caleb Houston. So I don't know what we can do about that trade-wise then. Other guys in the team that you could trade, Leonard Miller, right? Like, he's even cheaper, right? So that's kind of unfortunate. You could trade a PJ Dozier. It's not going to make much of a difference. Luka Garza, not much of a difference, right? Joe Ingles, I mean, we can go to $3 million, right? Where's Joe on this? So it's basically here downwards, like Derek Wright, Whitehead, Deron Holmes. Again, these later draft picks are kind of what you're looking at. Like, does an Oliver Maxence Prosper become available or something like that? Maybe you could look at that, right, as another wing or forward to add to the team with a little bit of potential. You might just rather have the shooting and good locker room presence, though, right? So I don't know. I'm looking through and like, I don't know a trade that this team can make. And so I don't think I actually want to do like a trade in this video. You know what? Here's what we can do. We're going to go to trades. I want to see what other people are actually coming up with here. Let's just scroll through like other teams and like what they're doing with Minnesota, right? What do the fans think that we should do for trades in Minnesota, right? And we'll go to new and see if there's anything interesting here that's going on. What the hell is this? All right, let's open this one with a new tab and just see what's going on here. Okay. So, in this one, we have the Timberwolves bringing back Jimmy Butler. That would never happen. Josh Richardson, they're sending out Towns and stuff. No, we're not doing that. Jimmy Butler's not going back to this team. What is this one? Another... So they're looking at some Karl-Anthony Towns trades. This is actually the same guy. Like bringing in Andrew Wiggins or something like that. What is this one? Bringing in Dennis Schroeder and Dorian Finney-Smith for Mike Conley and Jaden McDaniels. Interesting. Dennis Schroeder would be like good on this team. There is like one other part of it. How does that actually work? They get Derek Whitehead as well. I don't think I'm doing that one. No, I'd rather just have Jaden McDaniels. No, I'm good. These giant trades that are like taking place. What is going on here? I don't know. Trading Cat just for CJ McCollum and like Herb Jones. Interesting to say the least. Kind of the same thing here for Bogey and DeAndre Hunter. What is this one here? I already don't like this trade. The fact that it's Bojan and Cat's on the way out. No, Jimmy's not coming to the Timberwolves. Stop trying to do that. No, these are weird. Look at this trade, y'all, that somebody figured out. Somehow Anthony Simons is on the Warriors or whatever. Bruce Brown went to the Trailblazers. So did Modest Moody. Kind of a dump. The Raptors got Andrew Wiggins, which... yeah, let's add more Canadians and Kuminga and another one in Nickeil Alexander-Walker. That's kind of interesting. But like this one, it just kind of caught my eye because it's like, okay, let's just say Alexander-Walker was having a rough season and somehow they were able to get Oche, who's not probably as good, and then a couple second-round picks that could be assets, like trade assets for them. Like, interesting, none the least in that sense. Whoa, look at this one. The Knicks get Karl-Anthony Towns and they trade Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, Miles McBride, and Jericho Sims. I don't think that trade's ever going down, but Timberwolves fans, would y'all be happy swapping Cat for Randle and Mitch Rob? I don't know, let me know. I'll try to find one more. I don't know, y'all. I'm not seeing anything all that interesting here. I don't want to be like unrealistic with you guys. So, like, I just don't think there's a lot of trades that are actually going to come from this team. I think the NBA's, as we've seen, done a pretty good job of implying these rules and being like, yep, we're going to make it impossible for you to do things, right? And man, that's what it seems like. So if you guys want to trade Cat or Gobert for like some nonsense, I mean, let me know what it is. But otherwise, I think let's move on to rotations. Alrighty, here we are with the rotation screen. I always put a question mark on this just because I'm like, okay, like, I don't know what the rotations are actually going to be, obviously, but this is an activity that I'd always do with other coaches just to be like, hey, like, this is kind of what we're thinking for the year. We'd like guys to kind of average out around these minutes. So that's what we're kind of looking at right now. So if we start off with our first five here, Mike Conley, still a huge and integral. I don't know. English is hard, isn't it? A big part of this team, right? Still giving him 30 minutes, his old ass, right? Still need him playing at that level because we got a rookie point guard. If our rookie point guard can take more minutes from him, great. Anthony Edwards, one of the best players in basketball. You're getting about 34 a game. That's awesome. McDaniels and Towns, kind of in that same spot, right? Younger or / in prime guys, good basketball players, need them on the court for 32 minutes. Totally fine with that. Rudy Gobert, 26 minutes a game. Naz Reid, 26 minutes a game. I'm splitting them. And so you're kind of doing a weird three-man rotation that they did last year with these guys. I just want to make it clear that I want Naz on the court just as much as I want Rudy. I think we need to see what we have in Naz Reid. How much can we grow this guy, right? That's what I want. Then we got the rookie Terrence Shannon Jr. I told you he's going to be instant impact. I think he's going to be a more dynamic Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Want him on the court right now. Need him getting buckets, and I want him playing with Ant. I want to see if those two can play next to each other because I think that they could be a really big problem for people. Those are two very athletic guys that have dog mentalities that can really lock people up on defense. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, there could be something beautiful in this, and I got to see it sooner rather than later. We have Naw and Dillingham splitting about 16 minutes per game, kind of filling that role player role. If Dillingham, like I said, wants to get good early, great. Then I've got Joe Ingles just taking in some spot minutes. Runs a couple pick and rolls for us, hits a couple threes. Great. And then we have the reserves of Garza, Minot, Miller, and Dozier. We're not sure what we're going to have out of these three, but we got Garza if we need him. So we got bigs on bigs on this team. And honestly, pretty good rotation. If you go and look at the rotation data from last year, actually a couple lineups here with some pretty significant time behind them, so it's a good sample size. If we're looking at their worst lineup last year that had significant time, we saw Kyle Anderson with Mike Conley, Edwards, McDaniels, Gobert. So Kyle Anderson basically is like the first sub in or something like that, and Cat's coming out, and it's not Naz Reid. Lineup didn't work. It wasn't very good with Kyle Anderson, right? So not a big deal. Then we've got Naz Reid with Towns, Kyle Anderson playing the wing with Naw and Anthony Edwards at point guard. Is this an Anthony Edwards at point guard problem? Probably, potentially. Kyle Anderson playing the wing. We don't feel good about that. The spacing's a little iffy, and we don't have a good passer up there. Not surprised that lineup didn't work. We've got 200 minutes here of Gobert with Naz Reid, McDaniels, Edwards, and Conley. So Naz Reid subbing in for Cat right away. That lineup wasn't working all that well. It wasn't like a horrible rotation, but it wasn't positive, right? So that's something to note, but we've got a couple lineups here that were pretty positive that have a lot of minutes behind them. We got Cat, Gobert, Edwards, Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker in. So taking out McDaniels, adding more of a floor spacer. Not surprised that one actually worked pretty well, right? Because then Gobert can really operate and do his thing. Then we've got another lineup here of McDaniels with Towns, Gobert, Knott, and Edwards. So what was the difference between these two lineups? It's McDaniels is back in. They have taken Mike Conley out. So this one worked with Ant being the primary ball handler and just having another spacer behind him. So I think the problem was having Kyle Anderson as a non-spacing wing. So again, kind of reiterates the point that like losing Kyle Anderson, not the biggest problem at the end of the day. Then we got a huge sample size of this one. And what is it? It's Mike Conley, Ant, McDaniels, Towns, Gobert. The starting five is great. Perfect. That's what we like to see. And actually, this lineup was pretty good as well, with like Naz Reid at the forward as well, Ant being a primary ball handler again. So there's some good things coming out of this, right? We still have a lot of the key pieces on this team. That's awesome. If we go to the three-man combinations, some of the best ones that we saw was Ant, Naz, and Gobert. That doesn't surprise me. Naz being in at the top, awesome. Ant with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, right? And Gobert again. Gobert being such a big impact defensively, that's why he's so important, right? Ant again, Ant again, Ant again, Ant. Yeah, it's a lot of Anthony Edwards. You need that scorer on the team, otherwise things fall off. Like, it's just not a surprise at all. Where are some ones where we have like a ton of minutes? Like we have a ton of minutes showing Mike Conley with Gobert and McDaniels is a good combo. So that's just talking about the starting five, basically. Cat, Edwards, Gobert. Yeah, when you've got the starters mostly on the court, things went well for this team. After that, got a little bit more questionable. Seems like Kyle Anderson was maybe an odd man out. So we have reason to believe that this team's going to get better once they have Dillingham and once they have Terrence Shannon, right? And maybe even Joe Ingles is just a solid replacement for Kyle Anderson. Like, I'm led to believe that this team's going to be even better this season. So we feel good about that. Let's get into predictions. Oh boy, not a lot of teams left, huh? How many teams do we have left? We got just 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 after, or 5 after this video, right? Yeah, because we're on 25. That makes total sense. We've got the West, right? And we've got all of the non-playoff teams figured out at this point, at least from my perspective, right? We have all the play-in teams figured out. I don't think it's any surprise that I have the Timberwolves as a playoff team, right? I don't think any of us are surprised by that, right? They were this close to being like in the finals last year. So, Minnesota Timberwolves, where are they? Are they a top 4 seed or did they fall below the Kings? Have they taken a step back? Well, I spent most of this video telling you guys I think they got better, so drum roll, please. Drum roll, please. Where do we got the Timberwolves? What are we doing? Yep, it's a 3. I think you guys would have been pretty shocked if I didn't have the Timberwolves at the 3. I think the Mavericks got better. I think the Thunder got better. And I think the Timberwolves got better, man. Like, these 3 teams are going to be so fun to watch. So fun to watch. Like, I'm really excited about the Timberwolves. I'm going to go to a bunch of games this year. I got the Connect there. My barber's the same barber as a lot of their guys and stuff, too. So, like, I'm there. Right, I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna be enjoying it. Like, since I probably can't cheer for the Bulls much this year, gonna be excited for the Timberwolves. But hey, this is where I pass it off to you guys now. You guys let me know what you think down below in the comments. Let me know what you think of the Timberwolves, man. Like, I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say. It's the best part of my job, reading the comments. I respond to all of them for a reason, because I think it's fun. I know this is a down point in, like, the NBA calendar, and I know views are down on the channel because of that, so anything that you guys can do to help is always appreciated. But for my sweats that are watching right now with me, I'm glad that I can sit here and just talk ball with you until we have the start of the season and we can have something more interesting to talk about. But as always, going to keep bringing you guys these videos 5 times a week. We're almost to the end now, just got 5 teams left. But hey, I appreciate you guys as always, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks so much. Bye.